That night I stood on the ridge above my land flashlight in hand, staring down at the streets below. The entire HOA neighborhood, all those pastel houses and manicured lawns, was drowning under 4 feet of salt water. Their banners still flapped on light poles, Sandhill Bluffs, a lifestyle above the rest, but the only thing above the rest now was the tide. And the president of that HOA, the same woman who once called me a paranoid old crank, was shivering on my porch in soaked clothes, begging for help. It hadn't started with storms or lawsuits, it started with the birds. The sandpipers stopped nesting and the marsh pelicans shifted their flight paths inland. Small signs you only notice if you've spent your life watching coastlines breathe in and out. I had 30 years as a coastal engineer, the guy developers hired to rubber stamp beachfront mansions on sinking sand. I'd had enough of that. So I bought a quiet patch of high ground my grandfather once fished from and swore I'd live simply away from the politics of HOAs. But you can't live next to arrogance without hearing its noise. Sandhill Bluffs, that shiny new development beside me, was a disaster waiting to happen. Built too close, too low, too wide. When they invited me to a community forum under a rented tent, I showed up with charts, NOAA data projections. I warned them king tides were rising, that their seawall was graded wrong, their drainage buried under patios. The president, Linda Prescott, perfect manicure. Wine-dark nails, smiled like she was humoring a barking dog. "Thank you for your passion," she said. Then the newsletter came out. Fear-mongering retiree disrupts meeting. They didn't name me. They didn't need to. I watched them strip the last mangroves, the natural armor that had held the shoreline longer than any seawall ever would. I watched them pour foundations into damp earth and call it luxury. I called the county reported code violations. They produced forged paperwork claiming diseased trees. I spoke up again. They called me bitter. When I found my back fence spray-painted with a green smiley face, the same shade they use on their benches, I knew exactly who sent the message. I tried not to care. But every time I stood on my porch and smelled the salt creeping higher into the soil, I couldn't stay quiet. I sent letters 28 pages with maps, mitigation strategies. Linda sent them back, unopened, stamped, refused by recipient. Then came the cease and desist letter from her lawyers accusing me of spreading fear. They wanted me silenced. For a while it worked. And I'll admit there was a moment when I questioned myself. Sitting at my kitchen table with that legal threat in my hand, kettle screaming behind me, I wondered if I was the crazy one. Maybe I was obsessed, stuck in my old career. Maybe I was just the bitter old man they painted me as. I almost gave up. Almost. But then Felix knocked on my door. A junior city planner, nervous as hell, clutching a manila folder. He spread FEMA maps and risk assessments across my kitchen table. The whole neighborhood was marked Zone A, high risk. Worse, the HOA had submitted models using my land as their overflow basin, without my consent. They knew the risk. They'd gambled lives for profit. My silence wasn't protecting me. It was protecting them. So I shifted tactics. I stopped arguing with Linda's board. Instead, I opened my garage on Saturdays. Hurricane prep workshops, I called them. Folks came for the free coffee and stayed for the truth. I showed them how to set up generators, where to stash sandbags, how to read tide charts. I never mentioned the HOA, but I didn't need to, the evidence spoke. I'll never forget the look on Marcy Delaney's face, realtor by trade, when she saw the updated flood zone overlay. "That's not the map they gave us," she whispered. No, it wasn't. The board had buried the real one. Word spread. A binder appeared in my mailbox, internal HOA documents. Meeting notes emails a contingency plan, literally titled Non-Disclosure Strategy. They had budgeted for optics, not safety. Pressure wash the sidewalks after floods, install cheap drainage screens for show, but never address the real vulnerabilities. And, on the very last page, a bullet point frame. Morrow as paranoid. Do not engage. So I engaged in my own way. I uploaded every file, every chart, every dirty little email to a private cloud, and sent the link to every neighbor who had come to my garage. No commentary, just the truth. The neighborhood shook. Linda showed up at my door with her lawyer. "You're sowing panic," she hissed. "No, I told her I'm planting truth. Panic is your garden." They left red-faced, but I saw at the first crack in her perfect facade. Then came the first tide. Not even a storm, just a pressure shift and southeast wind. I watched the seawall fail at the very gap where mangroves used to be. The water seeped in slow and merciless, filling cul-de-sacs like a thief in the night. By midnight, cars sat half-submerged, alarms shrieking. Parents waded waist-deep, carrying their kids. Linda went live on Facebook barefoot in her kitchen, declaring it a minor anomaly while water rippled at her ankles. She deleted the video, but I recorded it. Everyone saw. That night, families pounded on my gate. I opened my barn, passed out lanterns, blankets, crank radios. By dawn, 30 people were camped on my high ground. I didn't gloat. I didn't say I told you so. I just lit a fire and brewed coffee while their neighborhood drowned. But that was only the rehearsal. The real king tide was forecast 48 hours later. This one wasn't speculation, it was confirmed. And this time, no one called me paranoid. We prepared as best we could. Reinforced walls rationed supplies, radioed warnings on an emergency frequency. Some neighbors still clung to the HOA's lies, trusting their board. Most came uphill, but Linda stayed behind, holed up in the model home with her attorney, as if elevation and denial could hold back the sea. At 2:00 a.m., the king tide arrived. It wasn't dramatic, a wall of water crashing down. It was worse. A slow, unstoppable surge that slid over streets, crawled into crawl spaces, pressed higher and higher until doors bowed, windows shattered. Transformers exploded in blue flashes, plunging homes into darkness. The HOA's sandbags dissolved like tissue paper. Calls came over the radio. "My house is collapsing. Please help elderly trapped on Seaspray Court." "My baby, she's not breathing." I grabbed my skiff and 3 volunteers, Raj, Felix, and Jamal, a retired firefighter, and we launched into the black water. We ferried the Haskells, too weak to walk. We carried a teenager bleeding from a head wound. We hauled families off rooftops while their homes dissolved beneath them. By sunrise, helicopters circled, too late, too few. Over 100 people staggered up to my land, soaked barefoot, clinging to whatever they'd saved. And then, finally, Linda appeared. Not in heels and pearls, but in a kayak, shivering, her eyes wide with terror. We dragged her out, wrapped her in a blanket. I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't need one. The tide had already delivered the verdict. In the days that followed, the HOA tried one last time to spin the story. Blocked city drain, they claimed. Unpredictable climate event. But no one believed them anymore. The county investigators arrived, taking samples, snapping photos, reading the same damning binder I'd leaked. Lawsuits loomed. The management company pulled out. The HOA dissolved overnight. I remember the morning Linda stood before the survivors, voice shaking, saying, "I failed you. I cared more about property values than safety." The board resigns effective immediately. She turned to me hollow-eyed and said, "Calvin kept you alive. He should lead." I didn't want applause. I didn't want a title. I just wanted the truth to finally stand taller than the lies. That was the end of Sandal Bluffs as they had built it. Not with a bang, not with victory champagne, but with silent saltwater and the wreckage of arrogance. And if there's one thing I've learned watching that neighborhood drown, it's this: you can lie to people, but you can't lie to the ocean.